Jeffrey Epstein may be dead, but this story isn't. A shocking new report from the New York Times sheds light on the connection between Microsoft founder Bill Gates and the late Jeffrey Epstein. After Gates' name came up in connection with Epstein and MIT Media Lab, Gates gave a statement to the Wall Street Journal where he insisted he did not have any business relationship or friendship with Epstein. But new reporting from the New York Times outlines numerous meetings between Gates and Epstein and a conversation with Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation, a connection between their foundation and JP Morgan to set up a charitable fund that would financially benefit Epstein. You know what I want to know? Why? Joining me now, one of the New York Times reporters from this story, James B. Stewart, who is also the author of a new book I highly recommend, Deep State: Trump, the FBI, and the Rule of Law. Let's start with this. Gates says, no relationship, nada, nothing. You report these two men met at least 6 times. What does Gates say about that?
Well, I believe that there were more, and he and his spokespeople would not say how many in total they actually met. But this included visits to the mansion, seeing each other in Seattle, flying on Epstein's plane, when we all know Bill Gates has his own $40 million plane. And then, as an investigative reporter, why would Gates say, oh, I had no relationship with him, when of course he knows what the facts are? So that always sets off red flags for me.
He also has one of the largest, most established foundations on his own. Yes. Why would they ever set up a charitable trust benefiting Jeffrey Epstein?
Well,
what's the explanation?
Not only does he have the world's largest terminal.
Turns cartwheels across the floor. I was feeling kind of seasick. The crowd called out for more. The room was humming harder as the ceiling flew away. Told his tale that her face at first just ghostly turned the wider shade of pale.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Thank you for joining us on this special day. This week, we have the tremendous honor of welcoming...
moved by my visit today to the Western Wall. Words fail to capture the experience. It will leave an impression on me forever.
With your entire delegation. This is an important meeting. Israel and Germany have a unique bond. It's forged of tragedy and hope. And a great friendship.
U.S. officials didn't really go there as an official visit, but your visit is official.
Hadn't occurred to me. This is my 6th trip to Israel in the past 4 years. I think I've prayed at the Western Wall on 2 or 3 of those times. We're also going to Yad Vashem tomorrow, where we've been several times, Yad Kennedy. So I haven't thought about it official, non-official. In this case, my father-in-law just passed away, so my wife and I are going to go, and I'm sure we'll keep our prayers in confidence, but I'm sure he will be prominently among our prayers.
In New York now and in the United States, we've had a rash of anti-Semitism, over 100 acts of anti-Semitism. And I'm sad to say also in my state, the state of New York. It is disgusting. It is reprehensible. It violates every tenet of the New York State tradition. The relationship between the Jewish community and the people of the state of New York is built on mutual support and respect. It is built on love, and that will not change.
Hi, I'm Gavin Newsom, Mayor of the City and County of San Francisco, and we're right here at the Port of Tel Aviv, and I'm very proud to be Israel 21C, Face of Israel of the Day, out here with a delegation of 200 celebrating the 60th anniversary of Israel. We have got a diverse group of committed people that are here to exchange ideas and thoughts, to learn, to listen, and to understand from business, from culture, opportunity for us to connect, but we're here most importantly just to celebrate our connection in history between the San Francisco Bay Area and our friends in Israel. This is also an opportunity, this trip, to connect in a meaningful way to that effort so we can continue the narrative for another 60 years, 600 years.
If someone had said to you in December that by April, millions of people all over the world would be infected with a mysterious new virus that has no vaccine, you'd think they were talking about a Hollywood script. It's happened so fast, it almost doesn't seem real.
Breaking developments in the coronavirus pandemic. The death toll rising in the U.S., more than 60 dead.
Doctors on the front lines in Italy with an ominous warning tonight, calling this the apocalypse and telling the world to get ready.
Well, most of us have never lived through anything like this.
No one is immune to the COVID-19 virus. It threatens all of us.
Now imagine a world where mass outbreaks of deadly diseases are commonplace. Well, it sounds scary, but that might not be too far off. The World Health Organization has warned in a BBC interview that we're entering a new phase where such a reality is, quote, a new normal.
As the coronavirus pandemic brings life across the country to a grinding halt, Americans are facing a new normal.
It is a new normal that we all have to get used to.
I know a big question, Tom, from a lot of New Yorkers. When might we ever get back to normal? The governor talked today about working toward a new normal.
So we're going to a different place, which is a new normal.
This morning, almost 40 million Californians waking up to a new normal. Social distancing at schools and businesses.
You may be having dinner with a waiter wearing gloves, maybe a face mask, dinner where the menu is disposable, where your temperature is checked before you walk in.
A new normal that will hopefully allow America to reopen.
Looking forward into this next phase of reopening and establishing some kind of new normal.
Embrace the new normals of social distancing and sheltering in place, all the physical isolation.
Now masks are becoming the new normal.
What do you think? Can schools operate under social distancing guidelines? And is that what they're going to potentially have to do as the new normal?
When we get out of the sort of new normal and get to a new normal.
Just trying to cope with the new normal. This is the new normal.
So, for example, if I see it rain outside, I saw the rain outside. Now, circumstantial evidence is different. Circumstantial evidence is evidence that does not point directly to a fact, but it's inferred. That means that there's a reasonable assumption that it happened. So, for example, if I go outside and I see there's water on the car, there's water on the ground, there's water in the street, I can make an inference that it rained. Okay, now do I know when it rained? No. But I can make an inference that it rained. So that's the difference between circumstantial and direct evidence. Now let's put it into a criminal justice scenario. For example, if I see somebody smoking marijuana, that's a personal observation. That's direct evidence. But if I go into a room and I smell marijuana and I see a roach in the ashtray with marijuana, and I see somebody with red eyes smelling like marijuana, that's circumstantial evidence that that particular person was smoking marijuana. So that's the difference between direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. That's your Mercy Minute. Goodbye.
This is Prime Minister Netanyahu's second official visit to China.
I'm embarking on an official visit to China by invitation of China's government. I will meet with the president, the premier, and we will mark 25 years of relations between Israel and the great power.
Trade and commerce loom large during this trip. 90 business people are accompanying Mr. Netanyahu. They'll be meeting heads of China's biggest corporations, including multi-billion-dollar internet giant Baidu.
Aside from bilateral trade agreements, business, and politics, Israel's prime minister is also visiting China for maintenance.
During meetings with President Xi and Premier Li, Prime Minister Netanyahu will undoubtedly touch on Mideast politics, specifically regarding Iran and Syria. As China's political and economic strength grows, Israel's government wants to demonstrate in person the interest in maintaining warm ties.
This is also an opportunity for the Prime Minister to again make it clear that Israel wants to cooperate with China, that Israel wants investment from China. This is very important that they hear it loud and clear from the person who's holding the top position in Israel.
Israel and China will sign economic agreements during this visit. Israel's government anticipates entering into a free trade agreement with China in July. Stephanie Fried, CGTN.
Announcing a commitment over this next decade, which we think of as a decade of vaccines having incredible impact. We're announcing that we'll spend over $10 billion on vaccines.
Hailed by the Gates-funded media.
For the record, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a NewsHour underwriter.
And applauded by the pharmaceutical companies who stood to reap the benefits of that largesse. The record-setting commitment made waves in the international community, helping to underwrite a global vaccine action plan coordinated by the Gates-funded World Health Organization. But contrary to the Gates' own PR spin that this $10 billion pledge was an unalloyed good and would save 8 million lives, the truth is that this attempt to reorient the global health economy was part of a much bigger agenda. An agenda that would ultimately lead to greater profits for big pharma companies, greater control for the Gates Foundation over the field of global health, and greater power for Bill Gates to shape the course of the future for billions of people around the planet. This is Bill Gates' plan to vaccinate the world. You're tuned into the Corbett Report. Given Gates' pledge to make this a decade of vaccines, it should come as no surprise that, since the dawn of this coronavirus crisis, he has been adamant that the world will not go back to normal until a vaccine has been developed.
But we're going to have this intermediate period of opening up, and it won't be normal until we get an amazing vaccine to the entire world. The vaccine is critical because until you have that, things aren't really going to be normal. They can open up to some degree, but the risk of a rebound will be there until we have very broad vaccination. Well, they won't be back to normal until we either have that phenomenal vaccine or a therapeutic that's like over 95% effective. And so we have to assume that's going to be almost 18 months from now. And then the final solution, which is a year to 2 years off, is the vaccine. So we've got to go full speed ahead on all three fronts.
Just to head off the conspiracy theorists, maybe we shouldn't call the vaccine the final solution. Maybe just the best solution. Okay.
More interestingly, since Gates began delivering this same talking point in every one of his many media appearances of late, it has been picked up and repeated by heads of state, health officials, doctors, and media talking heads, right down to the scientifically arbitrary but very specific 18-month time frame.
Realistically, COVID-19 will be here for the next 18 months or more. We will not be able to return to normalcy until we find a vaccine or effective medications.
The hard fact is, until we find a vaccine, going back to normal means putting lives at risk.
This will be the new normal until a vaccine is developed.
The only thing that will really allow life as we once knew it to resume
is a vaccine.
Obviously, we continue to work on the vaccines, but the vaccines have to be down the road by probably 14, 15, 16 months. We're doing great on the vaccines.
The fact that so many heads of state, health ministers, and media commentators are dutifully echoing Gates's pronouncements about the need for a vaccine will not be surprising to those who saw last week's exploration of how Bill Gates monopolized global health. As we have seen, the Gates Foundation's tentacles have penetrated into every corner of the field of public health. Billions of dollars in funding and entire public policy agendas are under the control of this man, an unelected, unaccountable software developer with no medical research experience or training. And nowhere is Gates's control of public health more apparent than in the realm of vaccines. Gates launched the decade of vaccines with a $10 billion pledge. Gates helped develop the Global Vaccine Action Plan administered by the Gates-funded World Health Organization. Gates helped found Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, aiming to develop healthy markets for vaccine manufacturers. Gates helped launch Gavi with a $1 billion donation in 2011, going on to contribute $4.1 billion over the course of the decade of vaccines.
And so I'm pleased to announce to you that we're pledging an additional $1 billion to
This is a model of this area as it looks if we peeled off all the buildings. About 3,000 years ago, according to the Jewish tradition, the peak of this mountain, Mount Moriah, is the place where King Solomon built the first temple.
יהי שלום בחילך, שלווה בארמנותייך. למען אחי ורעי אדברנה שלום בך. למען בית אדוני אלוהינו אבקשה טוב לך.
Cari fratelli, cari amici, da questo luogo santo lancio un accorato appello a tutte le persone e le comunità che si riconoscono in Abramo. Rispettiamoci e amiamoci gli uni gli altri come fratelli e sorelle. Impariamo a comprendere il dolore dell'altro. Nessuno strumentalizzi per la violenza in nome di Dio. Lavoriamo insieme per la giustizia e la pace. Salam.
As a police officer, I'm compelled to make this video. I've been in law enforcement for 10 years, and I'm speaking to my peers, other fellow officers, people in any kind of law enforcement position. I've seen officers nationwide enforcing tyrannical orders against the people, and I'm hoping it's the minority of officers, but I'm not sure anymore, because every time I turn on the television, every time I look to the internet, I'm seeing people arrested or cited for going to church, for traveling on the roadways, for going surfing, opening their businesses, going to the park with their families, or doing nails out of their own house, using their own house as a place of business, and having undercover agents go there and arrest them and charge them with what? With a crime? I don't know what crime people are committing by doing nails in their own house, but we're seeing this more and more and more, and we need to start looking at ourselves as officers and thinking, is what I'm doing right? Now, I want to remind you that regardless of where you stand on the coronavirus, we don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. I don't care if it's your sergeant or your chief of police. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise. It's not how this country works. Those are de facto arrests. You know, we're violating people's rights and taking money from them, or even worse, arresting them and depriving them of their freedom when they are exercising their constitutional rights. So let's talk about that. Let's read something right here off of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Among these, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed, meaning our power and any government official's power is derived from the people. Okay? We don't hold power over our citizens. It's contradictory to everything that our country stands for. And this is what I'm seeing. First Amendment rights, telling people they can't go to church, freedom of religion. Okay? Telling people they can't protest, freedom of assembly. Fourth Amendment violations, illegal traffic stops to check for papers. What are you, the Gestapo? Is this 1930s Nazi Germany? You don't get to stop people unless you have reasonable suspicion or probable cause that they have committed a crime. And I know people that have personally been stopped saying, we want to see papers showing that you're essential.
David, you copy a phone call.
That is not how our job works, okay? What really has been pissing me off lately is the fact that these officers that are going out here and enforcing these tyrannical orders, what they're doing is they're making my job and my safety, or they're putting my job and my safety at risk. Because what you're doing is you're widening the gap between public trust and law enforcement officers. And what that's going to do is it's going to, I mean, look at what's happened to law enforcement in the last 10 years. Less and less public trust, and more often than not, that is a result of isolated incidents that get blown out of proportion. Well, they're not isolated anymore. They're happening every single day. And the thing that I want you guys to realize is that our power that we hold as law enforcement officers is nothing more than a facade. It's a badge and a gun. And people, you don't realize, if you haven't lived in anarchy, if you haven't seen combat, things can be stripped from people in a heartbeat. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that these actions are going to wake a sleeping giant, i.e. the American people, okay? They are going to be put in a position where they won't have their rights trampled anymore. And us as law enforcement officers, we'll have our ability to enforce the law stripped from us in about 10 minutes, okay? I think what is going to happen if this continues is we're going to see bloodshed in the streets, okay? I don't want to see bloodshed in the streets on either side of this coin. I don't want to see fellow officers get injured or killed, and I certainly don't want to see citizens get injured or killed. And I promise you, most of you out there, doing these tyrannical acts against our citizens, you're not ready for combat. You're not mentally or physically ready for combat in the first place. I promise you, you don't want to go through that, and I hope I never have to go through that again. You don't get to just say, well, I'm doing this because I was told to do so, or I'm following orders, or I need to keep this job. Guess what? I need to keep this job more than anybody. I have 3 young children. I have 2 houses. Like, I have the same sob story that the rest of you guys have. But my personal choices and my living arrangements, no matter what they are, don't allow me to trample on people's rights. And I don't understand why that concept is so hard for people to understand. Listen, you need to stand up for what's right. You need to, if you're part of a department or an agency that is asking people or asking their officers or their deputies to impose on people's rights and infringe on their freedoms, you need to step up and say, no, that's not me. That's not what I signed up for, and that's going against my oath. And if that costs you your job, so be it. At least you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror at night. I've already expressed this to my department. And luckily for me, I come from a department that I feel like my chain of command shares my view, but I don't care what department you're part of or what your chain of command thinks. You don't get to trample on people's liberty. And so, as a special operations veteran, I've fought on the streets of Iraq under the U.S. government's guise of freedom. And I'm telling you what, the American people are going to you are going to wake a sleeping giant, and they are going to fight 10 times harder for their freedom on their soil than anything you've ever seen before. And if that's something you're willing to face, then keep trampling on people's rights. But I promise you, the American spirit of defiance is going to rise again, and it's going to be a big problem for our country. So I'll leave you with this, something that I learned as an E-nothing in the Army. No matter what situation you're put in, if you look inside yourself and ask yourself one question, am I doing the right thing? You ask yourself that, you know the answer. And no amount of money or no order or law or anything should be able to make you go against doing the right thing. So I'm imploring officers to look inside themselves and ask themselves, is this what I want to be doing to my citizens? And I think the answer is clear. And if we all stand up together, guess what? It'll be a non-issue, no factor, because people and law enforcement will be united like we should be.